All right, it is 12:01 Central, 1:01 Eastern. I'm going to go ahead and get things kicked off for today. My name is Julie Lawson. I'm the Director of Operations and Partnerships over here at the Loss Prevention Foundation, and it's my pleasure to get to host today's webinar. Today's webinar is Stop Managing Symptoms, Automate Solutions, and Scale with Agentic AI. Today's webinar is sponsored by Axis. Axis Communications is innovating for a smarter, safer world. They develop innovative network technologies designed for safety, security, and operational efficiencies. Along with their industry associations and partner networks, they help their customers protect their security, customers, property, and compatibility through analytics, audio, and surveillance. They're flexible, scalable, and they're built on trust. With that, before we get kicked off into introducing today's speakers, I need to go over a couple of webinar logistics. So first, today's webinar is being recorded. So if you have to jump off for any reason, you can always visit your original registration link. You can always find that on our website as well. Or if you want to share it with any of your peers, no worries, there will be access to this afterwards. Also, most of you have already found the chat, but if you haven't and you do have questions, we do ask that instead of using the chat, if you can use the Q&A feature so that we can try and hit as many of those questions and they don't get lost for us. But with that, everyone was muted upon entry, so feel free to use the chat if you do want to kind of communicate back and forth, but otherwise leverage that Q&A space. Now it's my pleasure to get to introduce today's speakers. And today we have with us James Stark, Segment Development Manager for Retail over at Access Communications, and Matthew Eben, co-founder for Anava.Ai. Hopefully I got that right. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to James.
Hey, Julie, thanks a lot. Appreciate you guys hosting us today with the Loss Prevention Foundation. I'm excited to be here today with Matt, the co-founder of Anava.Ai. Anava is one of our technical integration partners here at Axis, and that's one of the strengths of what we do here at Axis is our partner ecosystem. So, as Julie mentioned, with hardware, and looking into the future, we try to enable technologies like Matt's with Anava, and I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Matt through one of our key account managers, and since then we've come to learn more about Anava and get to know Matt a little bit better. And so, Matt, with that being said, how about I just turn it over to you and tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how Anava's come to be and how this partner ecosystem looks for you.
Yeah, thanks, James, and thanks all for joining today. I appreciate you taking the time, especially with it being Veterans Day. Yeah, I've been in cybersecurity primarily for most of my career. The company got founded because the founder and I worked together in a couple of different cybersecurity companies. He also happens to be a serial entrepreneur and got into a retail business of his own, started his own retail business, and found that he needed to secure his business. And when he decided to do that, he decided to go with the best cameras for that, which of course is Axis cameras. What he found was that there was a specific use case that he was trying to solve with his cameras that there wasn't a way to do it. So he taught himself how to write software for Axis cameras. And that's the beauty of and the power behind Anava is the fact that Axis has this rich application development SDK and application ecosystem that allows for organizations like Anava to thrive. Effectively, what he had built for the his original use case was a product called Orbit, which can basically train multiple PTZs in a three-dimensional space on a specific area in a warehouse based on an RFID tag location. One of the Axis SEs in the region that he was in saw that and said, "Hey, this guy can actually really build some cool ACAPs." So he got involved doing other stuff that Axis was asking him to do at the time. One of those was the ability to extract an image and send it off via an API to an external system for analysis. Around August of 2023, everything changed when ChatGPT went multimodal, and we pointed that ACAP at that thing for the first time. It was kind of like a eureka moment, right? And what we found, both being cybersecurity guys, is when you can basically take the physical world and turn it into a data structure and a data stream, we can start to apply a lot of the best practices that we learned over the last 20 years in cybersecurity around things like least privilege access and automated and orchestrated responses to things like threat conditions and behaviors. We can bring that knowledge to bear in this new industry that's really been kind of craving that for a long time. I was mentioning before, and I was talking to James and others that, you know, physical security feels a little bit like cybersecurity did about 20 years ago. Like we knew that we needed to orchestrate, we knew that we needed to automate, we knew that we needed to become more real time. And now there's really a sea change opportunity to do that.
Cool. So I guess my question is, Matt, the term, I'll use quotations, AI or artificial intelligence has been around for a while. And, you and I chatted offline a little bit about, how there's been a lot of overpromise and underdeliver. And again, just kind of staying with that mindset, how do we delineate in today's times kind of what myth versus reality? And then if we can just take that for a second, and I've got a follow-up question after that. But if we could start with that myth versus reality, kind of what are the differentiators now?
Hmm. Yeah, I really don't envy anyone who's in the position of the consumer because there's so much noise out there to cut through. I mean, when we launched this company, we saw it ourselves. We kind of stealthily went to ISC East last November, before we officially even launched Anava, and kind of poked around at all these people saying AI. It's like, well, yeah, we're an AI company. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, we can detect this one thing. It's like, well, I would argue that's not really AI. I mean, that's more like, yeah, you trained a model. But it's effectively object ID and like layered heuristics. It's not really AI because it's not flexible beyond that, right? And that's kind of been the issue, right? If you look at for the last, I mean, people have been saying AI and physical security now for the last 10, 15 years. And there have been some great strides made. I mean, even if you look at like Axis's own product, like Axis Object Analytics, it's a beautiful piece of software and it's really effective at identifying the things that it can identify, but it doesn't have context with it. So it's more of like computer vision, machine learning, object identification, less than AI. And if you look at the solutions out there that have been saying for years that yes, we can do AI, we can actually train custom models for you and stuff like that, they tend to have issues of flexibility and scale as well, right? You can train a model that does one thing and does a really good job of it, especially if you think in like a manufacturing capacity. You can train a model to look for a specific flaw, and it's great at that. Um, but you need thousands of hours of video, thousands of hours of images, or thousands of images to feed it. You probably need a big chunky GPU server to run it, and it's not extensible beyond the original use case that you designed it for. So um, the reality is that we're kind of at a juncture point in the industry where context is now available, and extensible context, not just the context of a rules engine combined with object detection, but actual language context. Wrapping a language model around a vision model is really changing what we can ask of these systems and the types of things that we can do from an outcomes perspective.
Yeah, and I've worked with one of my colleagues, Robert Brown, a lot on this with MQTT and how you extrapolate the actual context behind the video and what that looks like, right? And so
Mhm.
when we talk about these things though, and I was recently at an industry event, a grocery shop in Las Vegas, and agents were all the buzz, right? And talking about how agents are being created at tens of thousands a day, and how different things are happening. And so, as the layperson or the person who's trying to wrap their head around that, you talked a little bit about how do we start to delineate? Okay, what is the difference in generative and agentic and agents and large language models, and what is that? I mean, how do we make sense of all that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the easiest way is to distill it down to almost kind of like treat it like almost like a Turing test, if you will.
Okay.
Can you ask it a question in a statement that you just, in words, can you ask the system to do something and have it respond in a way that you would expect it to do,
Sure.
right? that means that you're dealing with something that's more agentic. It's leveraging the fact that you have the context engine of a language model with the vision model wrapped around it, right? I mean, we can, when we dive in, we'll kind of show some slides and stuff here of actual use cases of the types of things that people are using, retailers especially, are using Anava for. And it's almost infinitely extensible, right? It's kind of like if you can describe it in words and the camera can see it, you can now be notified about that in real time, whether it's an object, it's an action, it's a behavior, it's a condition, or a lack of any of those things. That's the test that I would put to anyone that says that they're doing AI, right? So if you go and talk to somebody and say they have a, you know, condition detection AI that looks for this thing, be like, okay, well, can I use it to tell me when there aren't enough shopping carts in the entryway of my store? And be like, if they say no, or you need to give me a couple thousand hours of video to train a model to do that, I would say that's the previous way, right? If
Right.
you do it out of the box, that's kind of like the agentic approach.
Okay, awesome. So you've already kind of unveiled a little bit of use case and kind of shined
Sure.
some light on it. So why don't we just dive into what, from your perspective, what is possible in today's environment in retail? You know, again, we say it's very complex, siloed solutions are really becoming a hamstring to retailers. So
Mhm.
what is that next step for us?
Yeah, so the next step is the implementation of a almost human-like intelligence, a human-like capability, right? Where, you have these problems like hidden losses, right? So whether it's theft, misscans, fraud, or customer sat issues, things like long lines, empty shelves, missing inventory, unsafe environmental conditions, or, things like, uh, you know, physical plant type of events or conditions that may impact customer sentiment, that sort of thing. You can solve a lot of that by having humans watching screens or watching video feeds, but that is cost prohibitive and it's resource intensive, right? And it tends to be fairly reactive. So the way that we approach that, and Julie, if you advance the slide one, is we effectively, by leveraging our integration with Axis and the fact that Axis publishes this rich SDK, um, we've created an app-based solution to this, right? An app-based solution that requires no new servers, no GPUs, no need to train thousands of hours of video or training data. Don't need to rip and replace your VMSs. All of your existing alerting workflows and stuff like that, that all stays exactly the same. No need to re-architect. No need to rip out cameras and put in proprietary hardware. Really, all you need is an Access camera, a Gmail account, and a credit card to get started. And we can start to unlock a lot of these use cases. We say that Anava presents AI the ability to see, hear, and speak. Kind of as we start to go through some of the use cases, you'll start to understand why. So if we advance the slide here, Julie. So this is actually a use case that a retailer is working on or working with us on right now. Access cameras again. Person walks into the scene at a self-checkout, and the cameras basically grab the image. Anava extracts the image, does the analysis, looks for items on the bottom shelf of a cart. These are frequently misscanned items at self-checkouts, whether intentional or unintentional. And again, the system has the ability to speak and speak contextually. So the system will come online and just say, thank you for shopping with us. Don't forget to scan your root beer, right? And people will see that and they're kind of like, how in the heck? Like,
So,
who's
so can
who
we,
knows
yeah,
that
can we
got
talk
root
a little bit more about that? I mean, how is that?
beer?
So this is where we start getting into connected IoT devices, right? And
Mhm.
and the agents actually giving commands on what to do. Is that
Yes.
is that a correct assumption there?
Effectively, yeah. So the way that our system works is again, it's functioning is running within the hardware of the Axis camera itself, grabbing the image and then wrapping that image in query language and then leveraging the fact that you have access to a cloud vision and language model to do the deep inspection and then response in a way that we specify, right?
Mhm.
So you on the software on the camera, you have what are a bunch of what are called analysts, and you teach these analysts skills. And a skill is basically a couple of sentences and a couple of objects that you basically tell it to look for as part of that analyst profile. And then your analyst profile is something like a trigger, a image interval, like a frame rate frequency, things of that nature. Schedule, so you can have it running, daytime it does this thing, nighttime it does that. But yeah, operating as if you had multiple operators viewing that exact same camera at the same time. And we've tested up to 75 simultaneous analyst profiles running on a single camera at a single time. So we're effectively able to do more than what a single human watching that camera could do in near real time.
And no latency issues, no processing issues. It's handling all the commands, right?
No, because if you think about how the system works, the image extraction happens on the Axis camera in the hardware, on the ArcPack
Right.
chip, right? So you already have hardware acceleration for all of the image processing stuff. And then our system effectively is processing text. It's processing a request, and within about 2 seconds, it's processing the response and parsing that response out into ONVIF compliant messages that drop right into the event bridge on the camera. So when you install Anava and tell it to look for red F-150, you now have red F-150 detection as a trigger in your Axis camera within a second. And then that flows into your VMS. So you have red F-150 alerts right in your VMS within a second. And the round trip time for this analysis is usually about 2 to 3 seconds max.
Yeah, and you're going from camera to cloud in that situation, correct?
We are, yeah. And the way that we're architected, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit when we get into the privacy aspect.
Right.
We leverage the fact that we can set up, and we have a fully automated installer that does this. We have an automated installer that sets up a Google Cloud instance with all of the Google Cloud services, including like Vertex AI with Gemini behind it, and all of the enterprise grade authentication, OAuth exchange, things of that nature from because like I said, we're cybersecurity guys. That all gets set up in an automated fashion for the customer within about 10 minutes of turning the system on. And it's the customer's Google Cloud instance. That's an important differentiator. Anava does not provide a cloud. We are not a cloud hosting company.
Okay.
No data ever comes to us. No video ever comes to us. No queries ever come to us. It's all customers' Axis cameras, customers' cloud instance. So all of the data governance is within the existing cloud data governance practice.
Right. And so, I mean, so if Google is one of your cloud providers, you can absolutely leverage this, right? From the enterprise perspective.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. And we started with those guys just because there's so much goodness you can do with that, and price performance. We're always kind of keeping our finger on the pulse of price versus performance, which models are the best. And
Right.
Google has some inherent advantages there over the others.
Okay. Very cool. And that gives you the opportunity also to leverage some of that spend commit, I would assume as well, right? With your IT departments, if you're looking for funding or something, and now this goes into the Google instance, just like, hey, I know we have X dollars to spend every year. This can go to that pool.
Yeah, exactly. And we've also seen customers take this back to their Google account teams and say, hey, we're going to start using it for this type of thing. And that opens them up to additional discounting and stuff like that from their Google partners and stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah, anything we can do, and I know we'll talk a little bit about ROI and a little, towards the end, but I think it's those building blocks that we get to, how do we fund, how do we bring value to the organization, how do we get cost savings, all those things. So I'll turn it back over to you to let you continue to roll through then.
Sure. Yeah. So if we don't mind the next slide there, Julie. So obviously that's, just the high level, how the system works and just one thing that someone's using it for. But these are all use cases that retail customers are testing or using the system for. And, I can read through this list, one at a time, but I mean, obviously some of these are going to be pretty obvious, right? So someone attempting to conceal an item, that's pretty straightforward. Like I mentioned, our founder was previously owned a retail business, so he knows how to integrate things with point of sale systems. So things like void fraud, right? Is there one particular cashier where there's a lot of voids happening, or is there a void happening after the customer already left? Item validation we talked about already. looking for open cash drawers when there's not a customer present, sweethearting type behaviors, right? Again, it's kind of goes along with void fraud lots of times. PDQ theft. This one's kind of fun. Um, Working with one retailer where they have an issue with people stealing antihistamines, right? As you might imagine, those are used for a number of things. Someone grabs maybe a box of Zyrtec and we don't say anything. Somebody grabs 2 boxes of Zyrtec, we don't say anything. Someone grabs an entire PDQ of Zyrtec, they get a talk down. Hey, you in the blue shirt, is allergy season bad this year? I mean, can we help you out with that? Right? Like,
So you can get creative with your messaging as well, huh? It doesn't have to be
absolutely.
canned. Okay.
Yeah, and kind of letting them know that, well, it's contextual, so it will talk to them based on what they're wearing, right? So
Right.
think that it's an actual human talking to them because it's addressing them by their attire. And then it's kind of cracking a joke about what they're doing. It's like, hey, we see you, put it back, come on,
Right.
no harm, no foul, let's go. Suspicious vehicle behavior, it's another one. We've heard about that with like ORC, especially with like the same use case of the PDQ theft. Usually they have someone staged at, in the alleyway outside of the store or something like that, or behind the store outside the fire exit. Somebody pulls up in a car and opens the trunk. That's not it's not a delivery vehicle. We just send a message, say, hey, you in the Blazer, we see that you've got your hatch open. Are you having car trouble? Can we send somebody out to help? Just a non-accusatory type talk down message that again addresses them by the vehicle they're driving, and just kind of makes them think, okay, well, I'm actually being watched here. And then there's known behaviors that specific customers have told us about, right? Like they'll see backpacks that are not in backpack aisles, right? Somebody grabs a backpack, stuffs a bunch of stuff in front of it, and sets it by an emergency exit. So things of that nature. Again, if you can describe it in words pretty much, and the camera can see it, you can now know about that.
Right. It's like we say, if you can imagine it, you can put it to test, right?
Mhm.
So if I can spend a little time with you here, I'm gonna put my practitioner hat on here. So you have void fraud, self-checkout validation, cash
Mhm.
drawer open. Are you doing any kind of and even sweethearting, are you doing any kind of POS integration? How is that? Can you talk a little bit about how that's being done at the POS?
Yeah, so all of those POS systems, well, most of the industry standard ones have API calls, right? So API capabilities. So anytime a void is hit, anytime a drawer is open, we can be getting a trigger at that point saying, hey, the POS system says take an image. So we take an image or take a series of
Okay.
images and say, when this trigger happens, this API trigger happens, do this action, right? Look for
Okay.
these behaviors, look for these things, right? So void is hit. Look, is there a customer there? Is there not a customer there? That sort of thing. Um,
Create the alert kind of thing.
Yep, exactly. It's the
Yeah.
magic of APIs, right? And again, this is kind of
Sure.
from
And is that a painful process to get the APIs and get all that done and plugged in, or pretty seamless? I
no,
mean, I remember in the old days, it just was their coding and all that, and IT would be like, it's, you size the project. And then
mhm.
one of my CIOs just told me, he said, look, if you have an API, I'll accelerate it through the agile environment, right? So it always found it to be easier with that. So is it still that easy with you guys?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're born in the cloud and we're built on APIs, right? Our system,
Okay.
if you think about it, is just a big ball of API calls, right? It's
Right.
microservices doing API calls back and forth to each other. It's not a monolithic app like Excel, right? It's built to be integrated.
Right. Okay. So, so we're gonna hold questions till the end there, and I'll let Julie run quarterback on that gang. But we've got some questions coming in already. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat though. But I think it's important for us, you know, I know sometimes these things can seem like they're as big as Mount Everest, right? When
Mhm.
really they're just a little hill.
Yeah.
And we can accomplish these things with the right partners in the right ecosystem. So I think from that perspective, we're talking in retailer use cases and things of that nature. And some of this stuff obviously gives retailers competitive advantage. So, they're not always going to be willing to come forward and talk about the secret sauce that's making the cake, right? Or what have you. So, but that being said, I think that's where it's important for us to be thought leaders in this space and talk about this art of what is possible in some of these use cases. So I'll turn
Mm.
it back and if you're ready for the next slide, just let us
Yep.
know.
Yep. Let's go on to the next one. So what I'm finding really, or what we are finding really interesting as we talk to organizations, especially retailers, but really everyone that we talk to, is for every typical surveillance or LP conversation or use case we have, there's usually two, three, four, or five like more operational use cases, right? And James, to your point earlier about where do you get budget for some of this stuff, a lot of this is where we're starting to see our constituencies and our champions in these organizations taking the capability of the combined Anava and Access solution out to their various different stakeholders and say, hey, we now have this capability, right? What would you like to know about the physical environment and be notified about, either in real time or, retroactively, that would make your life easier, right? So I mentioned the one already. We have a retailer we're working with that has told us that customers on average will spend 40% less in their store if they can't get a shopping cart right when they walk in. So they are now installing cameras looking at all of their cart garages in the front of the store just to solve that use case. That's an area where they didn't have cameras before. It's an area that they weren't even really monitoring for, operations type stuff before, and they're now able to do that. Uh, Same thing with like product spillage, right? You shouldn't have to have an associate tell you or a customer go find an associate and say, hey, a bottle of Tide just got knocked over. The system can tell you when that happens. It can be monitoring for things like that, dangerous conditions, and alerting the appropriate people. Dangerous items, people bringing items into the store that they shouldn't be, whether that's somebody approaching with a baseball bat or a crowbar or something even worse. Notify in real time, like when that happens. Inventory status. I mean, we've got Black Friday coming up here in a couple weeks. We can be notifying, if there's a hot item on the shelf, anytime we get below 5 units left on the shelf, like send a push notification, to the zebra or something like that that the stockers are carrying. Um, who's interacting with the products? What products are most interacted with? How effective are my end caps? Right. I'm talking to one customer right now who wants to be able to they lease out their end caps to various different companies, and they want to be able to provide really good data, interaction data back to the companies that are leasing that end cap space to say, all right, this is how many impressions that this thing got this week, and this is the product that was most interacted with, that sort of thing. Um, Marketing efficiency, that's kind of the same thing, right? But a high level demographics. Some people we can do demographics, some we can't. Operational efficiency, how smoothly is the store running? Regulatory compliance. This is one we've heard is kind of a big issue for some of our bigger retailers. Certain fire marshals are kind of like out to get people sometimes, I guess. So they'll walk around and they'll look for things like missing fire extinguisher, blocked fire exits, fire doors that are propped open, and any other like OSHA violations or anything like that. Those usually come with a $16,000 fine. Your camera can let you know when that's happening. Um,
Right.
so I mean, just about any, like I said, it's if you can describe it, you can use it for the system for that to know about that. To your point earlier, though, James, usually what happens when we go in and we talk to retailers and others is we find one use case or two or three use cases, focus on excelling at those, and then it grows from there.
Right. Yeah, that's usually the easiest. You're trying to troubleshoot one thing. I think the other side of this too is, all this beyond LP stuff, in loss prevention, we're always, you know, it's cost avoidance. Yeah, we're reducing theft, we're reducing shoplifting, we're reducing, we could have a $1 million problem here that we were able to adjust.
Hmm.
But I remember the challenges being in some cases, well, how do we know that what you put in really did what it was supposed to do, and how do we know it was impacted by that? So but with these items, I also found when I had risk management for a while, those are those are real numbers on the P&L, right? When you can get
Mhm.
accidents and things like that to reduce, those are quantifiable numbers. And we all like to celebrate the wins on the inventory loss and the shortage and really the impact to the customer. But when you can when a retailer knows these things, these kind of use cases, like we know for a fact that our customers buy 40% less if they don't have a shopping cart. So it's very important for us to have a shopping cart in. Well, we
Mhm.
can, as asset protection, loss prevention professionals, bring someone like you and say, "Hey, look, we're using this in our world, and we're having some great success." I think it can help you work with you in your areas as well.
Mhm.
That's a huge win, and it really positions our executive leaders out there in a good space with their executive teams.
Yeah, it definitely does. That's perfect point, right? Security is in our cameras lots of times are thought of as, that's a CapEx expenditure that I
Right,
almost have to have, right? But
right.
now you can use it to really drive OpEx savings across the business. Whether that's based on customer behavior, marketing metrics, um, you know, uh, a lot of the stuff we already talked about, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
fine reduction, customer satisfaction improvement. Sometimes that's easy to measure, sometimes it's not, but I mean, it's definitely tangible.
All right. So, what do you have next for us?
Yeah, so I mean, just kind of tying out, we've got just one slide that I wanted to kind of show of kind of how people are actually how one retailer is actually starting to integrate it fully end to end. Their staff all carry zebras. Zebras can receive smart alerts. So, like I said, Tide bottle gets spilled, or detergent gets spilled, or somebody knocks over a 2 liter of cola. We can be sending a push notification automatically to the custodial staff that's usually the ones operating the floor scrubber saying there's a spill in this particular aisle. This is the object that's spilled. Same thing with I have a grocery chain that wants to automate calls up to the front anytime you get more than like 5 shopping carts in line at the front end cash registers, right? Automatically call all cashiers up to the front based on the fact that their entire stocking department, who usually backfills the cashiers, they all carry zebras, right? They have an easy API integration that this particular organization is using to integrate that. So starting to tie all of the smart IoT devices together, the smart cameras with the AI vision that's working on top of it, and sending real-time push notifications to IoT devices that are, you know, being carried by a good percentage of the staff.
Yeah, so you're saying you're seeing retailers are readjusting their workflows and work processes around some of this stuff. Also, how does the reporting come through, the visualization, and those types of things? How does that work with Anava?
Yeah, great question. So more often than not, people they continue to consume the feeds from their VMS, right? Anava does have in it, we do have some central reporting capabilities. In fact, Julie, if you advance to one more slide, we do aggregate all of the data and all of the visuals, all of the outputs into a central dashboard. So you can go, camera by camera or use case by use case or condition by condition and look at all of the results of that and then start to plot it over time. We also have we have something. It's still relatively new, but it's super exciting. Some of our early adopter customers are using it and just blown away by it. Something called Aura reporting. It's AI automated reporting and analysis. Basically, what that does is it takes all of the analysis that Anava has seen over a period of time and then uses AI to look for patterns in that, right? So you can see, maybe which store is operating more efficiently, which shift at which store you tend to have higher, loss counts or, incident counts, that sort of thing. And it's customizable per audience, right? So you can think of like the chief security officer of a major chain of retailers is going to care about, high level metrics of, which stores are having the most issues and least issues. Whereas the individual store operators are going to care about like, okay, which shift tends to be doing this or which area is giving me the most problems. Um, there's a lot of really cool stuff we can do with the data once we've got it all tied together. And it allows you to tie kind of that LP and ops altogether for consumption. We'd have all of that, but to be honest, most organizations are still consuming the outputs from their existing VMS, their existing push notifications, their existing alerting workflows, because we don't necessarily want to replace any of that. That stuff is all there and it's working and it's fine. That's the reason that we built this, to do on VIF compliant messages and stuff that come out of the system, because that's a standard. That's the standard everybody already uses. Let's just snap into that. So, your Genetec's, your Milestones, your ACS Pros, your VMSs and everything where you're doing all that orchestration already, they all just got a heck of a lot smarter.
Okay. So are you saying, is this real time and forensic then?
You can do both. Yeah. So
Okay.
all of the data that Anava collects and analyzes, it actions it in real time, but it stores it in a NoSQL database in the customer's Google Cloud instance. And because it's up there in the customer's Google Cloud, we can do things like indexing of all of the images. So just like if you have Google Photos on your phone, you can like go into that and just type dog, right? And every
Right.
picture that you ever took of a dog will show up. Even if a novel wasn't conditioned or trained or told, in an analyst profile to look for dogs, um, because all of the images are up in Google Cloud and we can do vector search against that, you can just go in and there's a simple search bar. You just anything you want to look for, you just type that in, and it's kind of like the free text search in the VMS, but we're working off of images and not video. But there's a lot of really cool stuff we can do with that as well. So any type of thing that you wanted to find that maybe you didn't ask about in real time,
Right.
you can know about that. And then on the flip side, there is also a capability when we're fully cloud integrated. We have a system called a feature called Ask Anava, and this is the ability to ask all of your cameras or a subset of your cameras the same question at the same time. So think of like a condition of, say a lost shopper, right?
Right.
This individual is lost in the store. This is what they're wearing. Like, do any of the cameras see an individual wearing this attire? And then all the cameras that see that will come back and say, yep, I do,
Raise their hand.
I do, I don't, right? So really rapid way of finding a very specific thing as well.
Okay. Cool. So we've talked a lot about, the product and where we're going. You have anything else to add, or, with respect to that before we move into like, okay, how do we, what does the deployment look like? Because that's always, the deployment and maintenance and those types of things are always things that, I know I'd get challenged on is like, okay, well, who's gonna maintenance this thing? Who's gonna keep up with it?
Mhm.
Also who's gonna do the deployment, right? Kind of thing. So how easy are those things to keep up with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have a fully automated deployment system that deploys the app to your cameras for you, right? So you install you turn on this installer, you basically give it your camera subnets, and it will go out and it'll discover all of your cameras. And then you just select the ones that you want Anava to run on, and it will push the configuration down to those. And then we have a tag management capability, basically, where those skill sets that I was talking about are associated with tags. So, for instance, that shopping cart use case where I want to look and see if I have shopping carts. Um, that's a skill set that goes on like the front door cameras, right? So you just tag all the cameras that are front door cameras and they all inherit that skill set. So that's how you would kind of manage this at scale. We also integrate with a lot of the existing Access tool sets like ADM, Access Device Manager, and stuff like that for if you'd like to use that for administering of the ACAPs and stuff like that as well, because that's all built right into that.
Okay. So in that process, I mean, nothing comes for free, right? So how is
Mhm.
the licensing structure? Not asking for dollars and cents, but how is the licensing structure with Ignava?
Yeah, so we license per piece of hardware, right? Per camera, right? And that
Okay.
doesn't matter whether it's a quad lens camera or a single sensor camera, it's all the same. So you can kind of think about it as a license per camera or per IP address, if you will.
Okay.
And then, yeah, we just, however many cameras you want to put it on, we just use, and again, the beauty of the ACAP program, the licensing is actually handled by the ACAP SDK and the ACAP server. So like when I go create a license for somebody, I log into an Access server to do that.
Okay. All right. So relatively, straightforward, I would say.
Mhm.
It's there's no gotchas at the end of that there. It's a one-to-one. And I do think it's interesting because when we are in an environment of multi-sensor and we
Mhm.
are seeing a lot of customers, multi-sensor technology is taking off like no other. So, when you look at the quads or the dual head cameras or, anything else that may be out there that's stitching images together, some folks will look at that as a video stream but you guys look at it as it's a singular IP. That's what
Mhm.
I'm looking at for
Yep.
licensing perspective. Very
Yep, exactly. And we
good.
actually have customers, a lot of customers using like a quad lens camera. And
Yeah,
for certain skill sets, they'll do the mosaic view where it's like all four images together for like people counting, for instance. So we're not double
right.
people, we put them all into mosaic. But then, maybe on this lens or this sensor, I want to look for this particular behavior and that type of thing. Or on this sensor over here, I want to do something completely different, but only between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Right?
Got it.
It's infinitely configurable and tunable that way with those multi-sensors.
Awesome. And so when we got a few minutes before we kick it over to Q&A and wrap up the last 15 for the
Mhm.
Q&A, you know, what are you seeing as some early win successes with ROI with some of your clients?
hmm Great question. Yeah. So I kind of already mentioned, I buried the lead a little bit on like the shopping cart metric and the percentage of less spend when that's not available. But we kind of break ROI down into two buckets, right? In this particular case, like your LP ROI and your operations ROI. So LP based, we've seen customers reduce things like false positive alarms or nuisance alarms that their SOC has to operate or action by upwards of 70%. Um, we've seen real ROI benefits of being real time versus having to do things forensically or scrub video at like 16x to try to look for a specific behavior, right? The ability to stop and act in real time. That's all people cost, right? That's all time that people are spending scrubbing video when they could be doing something else. So just even on like the FTE savings or the employee efficiency savings alone, there's some pretty considerable impacts there. Cutting down the number of investigations that have to be done because we're able to do things in real time. And then on the operations front, like I said, we've got especially in like our construction trailers and stuff like that, we see this a lot. But even in retail, we see it quite a bit. Fire marshals coming through and writing fines and stuff like that for things like blocked fire exits or tripping
Mhm.
hazards and things of that nature. So we've been able to cut those dramatically at a couple of the early retail customers that were having issues with that.
Very nice. Um, and not to like sound like just bringing it down, but it's kind of like you guys are a Swiss Army knife for us, right? It's like, hey, I got this problem, Anava. Okay, what about this
Mhm.
problem, Anava? We can get creative with you guys in a way that I don't think we've seen in the past. Because it's
Yeah.
it's not scripted, right? You're not
Yeah.
saying, hey, here's our canned what we do. These are the report. This is you're basically giving the end user the ability to create and be basically an app developer kind of thing, right?
Sort of like if it in just yeah, in some very simple sentences. And I should probably highlight this as well. We have some AI tools that help you write the prompts as well, right? So if I
Okay.
want to go in and say, tell me if there are no shopping carts available, the AI model will come in and say, you should probably write it this way because it'll be more efficacious if you do, right? So we kind of
Yeah.
guide people in that. But yeah, that's exactly right. Like we are there's a port on the East Coast where we are monitoring container ships as they come in, and we're reading the name off of the ship, and we're watching for the mooring lines to attach to the dock. And as long as the mooring lines are attached, we've got a timer running, and we check every 5 minutes to see if the mooring lines are still there. And if they're gone, we stop the timer, and then we automate the billing back to that shipping company, right? And then
Wow.
I have another customer who is they are a hospital in a urban environment and they have a camera that overlooks from one of their hospital towers to a parking structure, and they just want to be notified when the top level of that parking structure is more than three-quarters full, so they can start sending notifications to people that come in saying, "Hey, maybe park down the street," right? Never use cases that we would have thought to market.
Right.
You know, the extensibility of the platform and the capabilities are what allow us to do just about anything that you can think of. Right.
Yeah, and as you were talking there, part of my responsibility was CT-PAC compliance when I was at Pier 1. And then when you were talking about the port, and we had cameras around all of our entrances and being able to hit all those checkpoints and then video have images to support all that, whether there was damage or what the seal was intact or whatever all the checkpoints are. And I'm a few years removed, so I'm not recalling all of them, but I think about being able to record that container coming through and onto my yard from the port,
Mhm.
and being responsible for that. So interesting use cases. And I've always said, as technologists, we can dream up whatever we want to dream up. Ultimately, and this is one of the things that I love when Axis would bring me something as an end customer, and they say, "Look what we did." I'm like, "Oh man, that's really cool." But what if I did this with this, and I did
Mhm.
that with that? The end customer always knows their journey better than us sitting on the outside, and I like to just cue things up and just see where people go with it. So it's very exciting stuff. So. That being said, Julie, we're about 15 minutes. So you want to walk us through any questions in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to kind of like touch on a couple of the things that you said. And James, I'm not really sure I could say it any better than you. Back from my retail days, you're right. Like the customer knows their business, but I love solutions where it touches on multiple departments and it's not just like one department specific, because then it strengthens the relationships that you have with those other departments, like risk management or store operations. So I absolutely love everything that you had talked about. So I'm super excited to even hear more as you continue your journey. That said, I did have one specific question myself, then I'll kick it over to the other questions that had come in. So you had mentioned alerts specifically on Zebra devices. I'm assuming that there are more alerts that you can actually like, put out there because to your
Sure.
shipping container one, I'm assuming they don't have Zebra devices. What are the other options for alerts?
Yeah, so I mean, anything that you can alert out of your VMS, like your Genetec, your milestone system, that's effectively the alert engine.
Love
We
it.
we create a trigger for them that's really, really intelligent, and then they just send push notifications or text messages or emails or, flash a light or, open a door or whatever you want it to do, like, play the Star Spangled Banner. There was an event at the Axis AEC, the Experience Center here in Tempe last week for Halloween, and somebody had set up an alert system that would play the Star Spangled Banner whenever a certain person would walk in, and we couldn't figure out why in the middle of this event all of a sudden it would come on super loud. It was hilarious. They
Oh
felt
my
very
gosh.
young. But yeah, any
Pretty
any
fun.
type of alert that you want to do, text, email, push notification to any type of device that can receive those things. It's all within scope.
I love that, James. I'm just saying, whenever I go to the Access Center here in Dallas, I feel like a song should come on for me. So
Well, yeah, you just send me whatever you want, Julie.
what my entry song is. All right. So, all right, Matt, you had talked about history and that it goes into the specific customer's Google Cloud. That kind of ties into a question that Kyle had. Does Anava collect data on specific products or categories that it identifies as higher risk based and how often it notices theft activities in those areas? Or is it simply identifying the activity and attempting to deter it? So is there any like after analytics done? I would say is probably the summary of the question.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, yes, the answer to that is yes to both of those. You would basically just tell it in the prompt, I care about this specific type of product or this specific category of product, and it can identify what the product is, right? It can tell you if it's a can of Diet Coke or regular Coke. I mean, you can get really granular and specific with what you want it to care about. But then also, I mentioned like the Aura reporting, the system's ability to kind of look at everything that it collected over a period of time and say, oh, it looks like there was an uptick in behavior in, this particular aisle around this particular type of product for this particular week. Maybe go investigate why, that sort of thing.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I'm gonna
and
double.
Julie,
Go ahead.
Julie, if I could jump on top, to just go a little bit deeper with that, folks, I think it's key to remember when you're getting into this level of granularity. If you can't see it with your eyes, the camera is not going to see it either. You got to have the right camera for the right, solution. And also, we call it pixels on target, whether we're zoomed in looking at, and you can create different views within a scene. that you can inference off of. But we're not going to hook up, an analog camera and think we're going to run something, or a 19, or a 2010 or 15 IP camera and maybe get the same result, right? So you got to think about that. The whole glasses analogy that I use about, using the right lens when you're getting to that level of granularity. And Matt, if I'm off base on that, you can smack me later.
Hmm. No, all good.
All right, so I'm going to actually kind of double down on your answer that you had given, Matt. So that would be, let's just call it for potentially a specific location in a chain. What about for a chain, and also being able to analyze all the data to maybe see if there's common patterns?
Yeah, definitely. So again, once with all of the data from the individual cameras and all of the individual analyses that we're done, fed into the Google Cloud environment, that's where a lot of that pattern recognition and pattern matching and stuff like that happens and can be reported on.
I think
So
that's amazing.
like all of that dashboarding and those dashboards that I showed, or those graphics that we showed with the graphs, that's that's all happening up in a Looker Studio instance that runs based off of BigQuery data in Google Cloud, right? So I kind of teased it at the beginning, right? We're taking the physical world and turning it into a JSON data stream for both real-time alerting, but for post-event forensics and analysis about anything that your BI team can ever think to dream up that they would want to know about that cameras can see. You can now report on that, with some basic SQL queries and some graphs.
Hey,
I love it.
Matt, how much do you guys, let's talk about storage there for a little bit, right? I mean, is it anything you can go back within 30, 60, 90 days, a year? What does that look like?
It's all up to the customer how long they want to keep it. And again, that's part of the reason that we do it via Google Cloud, because that way the customer can then be in control of their own data retention, and how long they store things. How long do they keep things in active storage versus shoving it off into like, cold storage if they do that still. Totally up to the customer.
Okay.
It's remarkably cheap to store stuff in the cloud. It's especially because we're not accessing it a lot once it's up there. So we haven't really run into any storage related issues or
Awesome.
concerns on that front.
Okay.
All right, so another question that had come in. I'm interested in how this is used in fulfillment to force multiply not only security issues, but also safety. Pit equipment too close, unsafe ergonomics, running, etc. And then the second part of the question, also, can this be used? And you had mentioned Genetech, so
Mhm.
I'm thinking the answer might be yes there, but also, can this be used with Genetech and Access setup?
Yes. So I'll answer the second question first. We're agnostic to the VMS, right? So whether you're Genetec, your Milestone, your ACS Pro, your any number of the other VMS providers out there, um, we create the really intelligent alerts that we drop into the camera, and as long as your VMS can pull those from the camera, you're off to the races. So we don't need to do bespoke integrations with the likes of Genetec and stuff, which is awesome because their customers see immediate value once they employ Anava.
And,
Uh,
and how does that work, Matt? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So it leverages the fact that it's on VIF messages that we create, right? It's the
Okay.
open standard that all of these systems use to communicate with each other, and that all alerts are created in. We just create alerts that are compliant with that. And then that becomes just a device event on the camera. So like I said earlier, like if you just type in as an object detection in Anava, red Ford F-150, and then immediately go into your camera and try to create an alert based off of, if you wanted to create an alert based off of red Ford F-150, you would see that as a trigger condition, you know, as soon as you hit enter in Anava, that
Okay.
shows up as a trigger condition in the camera. And then the VMSs are all configured to just bring that data in natively,
Okay.
right? So it just natively flows into the VMS. Now, some VMSs are a little bit more hamstrung than others in terms of that capability, but
Sure.
any of the enterprise grade, large scale VMSs that people are using at large deployments have that capability.
Okay. Cool.
And
All
then in
right.
terms of safety, yeah, I did want to touch on that. So
Oh, right. Yes.
yes, we actually have a number of customers using us for that in things like manufacturing operations, right? So forklift drives across the pedestrian walkway lane, they want to know about that sort of thing, or people standing too close to rotating objects or moving objects. I mean, I worked in paper mills. So I'm from Wisconsin. I worked in paper mills in college. I can think of thousands of use cases that we could be used for in that type of environment. So lots of really cool things that we're doing there. And with our retailers, we're looking for things like pallets left in walkways, tripping hazards, like I said, blocked fire exits, ladders leaned against the wall incorrectly, stacking that's not OSHA compliant, stacking things that are too high that are not bound together. And what's really cool is you can actually just tell the system, like, if you see an OSHA violation, tell me which regulation is being violated and provide justification for your reasoning. And it'll actually tell you the specific OSHA reg, and it'll say, it looks like this is a violation because this item is stacked too high and it doesn't look like it's bound properly. It's like, holy crap, this thing is crazy.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to try and hit the last two questions pretty quick because I know we're running out of time rapidly. This question is about cameras needing access to the internet. The cameras only are communicating with their NVR, and then the NVR has access to the internet on a different NIC, which that's a term I don't know, but that's okay. I'm assuming you know it. So if you can touch on that.
Yeah, so the cameras do need a way to get out to the internet. So, we can do things like proxy through the NVR if we needed to, basically set up the NVR as a gateway so that the cameras can get out. What we typically do is we typically see people just make that VLAN a routable VLAN and make the routed interface, the layer 3 interface for that, like a firewall, so that everything that goes out, from that VLAN can only talk to the firewall and then only talk to things that the firewall says it can. So we have a lot of documentation about how you can just whitelist just the specific services that you need, and then it's only TLS encrypted port 443. We're getting really nerdy on the network side now. That's
Yeah.
my
That's
background.
okay.
But yeah, they do need to be able to talk to the cloud instance,
Okay.
only the cloud instance.
All right. I love this question. Is there a recommendation on the number of cameras that they should have installed, Anava installed on for it to work at a full potential, for example, based on square footage, et cetera?
I recommend you put it on every camera that you own. No, I'm kidding. You can put
And
it
I
on.
didn't say that, just for the record.
No, no. All right, come on. I technically do look after sales for Anava, so I have to mention that. No, I'd say it's use case dependent, right? If you just want to do high level metrics of the overall scene and just get a description of only very specific conditions that are, easily identifiable with not a lot of pixels on target, maybe not that many. But if you're looking for things like spills and tripping hazards in like walkways in a congested and crowded environment, then you might need more cameras to solve that. Um, there are, and a lot of it comes down to the image sensor and stuff like that too. Like kind of 4K camera, we can do like view areas and crop in on specific things, and it's a longer answer than we really have time to go super deep on, unfortunately.
No worries. I am sure that we can make sure if your question did not get answered, they will be passed along to the team so that they can follow up with you. So have no fear. You will be followed up with. But that said, I'm going to go ahead and close us out for this webinar. So first, thank you so much for Access sponsoring today's webinar. We absolutely appreciate it. If you are in the audience today and you're interested in getting your LPC or your LPQ through the LPF, or you're interested in one of our ORC courses or even a lifetime membership, please feel free to leverage that promo code LPF 2025 for a 20% off discount. That's going to be good through the end of the year. That said, if you're here and you are LPC, this does count for 1 hour credit for your LPC for the credits that you need every year. So please make sure that you note that you were here today. Also, the LPF will be giving away 5 course scholarships. You do have to have been present. They are non-transferable, but those will be sent out to those folks that have been offered that by the end of the day tomorrow via email. You do have 5 business days to respond, so please make sure that you are checking your email. We do love to make sure that as many people as possible get access to that before it gets turned over to the next person. And then last, but absolutely certainly not least, if you are not already signed up for our webinar, scan that QR code on the left-hand side so that way you can get signed up and get notifications. We have webinars of all different types. It could be a leadership type of webinar. It could be a solution. I absolutely love the varying topics. So one may apply, one may not, but feel free to follow us there or follow us on LinkedIn. We always post them there as well. And then if you are not currently getting a copy of the LP magazine, that is free if you're in the US. So scan that QR code right there in the middle so that you can get access to a free copy of the LP magazine that is sent in print at least 4 times a year. That said, Thank you so much, James, Matt. It absolutely was a pleasure to have you guys on today. This was really informational, so I can't wait to see what else you guys two do together here in the future, and look forward to seeing y'all at shows in 2026.
Awesome.
All
Thank you, Julie.
All
Thanks,
right.
Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Y'all have a
everybody.
wonderful afternoon.
Cheers.